Well, I am good at some things. Being funny is not always one of them, but I'm going to try for the next couple of minutes. Mother's Day, here are some, let's call them encouragements to you today. Don't be so hard on yourself, moms. The mom in ET had an alien living in her house for weeks and didn't even notice. Good moms let their children eat the beaters, and great moms turn them off first. Being the mother of a teenager is finally understanding why some animals eat their young. Have you ever heard of a job that requires no experience, gives no training, pays nothing, and you can't quit? That's motherhood, and people's lives are on the line. Motherhood means that half the time I feel like I'm running out of an asylum, and the other half that you might belong in one. What's the fastest land mammal? The toddler who's been asked what's in their mouth. Have you ever heard the urban legend about what happens when you scream "Mom" 3 times in the shower? A nice lady appears and hands you a clean towel. That one's funny. Okay, maybe not. Most moms would say, right, I love all of my children equally except for the one who sleeps. I love that one the most. Why did mom get a plate of English muffins on Mother's Day? Her family wanted her to feel like a queen. Why do mother kangaroos hate rainy days? Because the kids have to play inside. You're allowed to groan at that one. Isn't it ironic that we celebrate a child on the anniversary of the day their mom did all the work? You know you're a mom when the first thing you say when you walk in a room is, "What's that smell?" You know you're a mom when you have multiple conversations a day about poop, and none of it is yours. You know you're a mom when you've been used as a human Kleenex and you didn't even mind. You know you're a mom when you use baby wipes to clean literally everything. And you know you're a mom when silence isn't golden, it's suspicious. Now, we know that Mother's Day isn't easy or always joyous. Some of us have good moms or average moms. Some of us have bad moms or absent moms. Moms who've passed away. Moms who are abusive or neglectful. We have some people maybe who desperately wish that they could have been a mom, want to be a mom, and some who maybe even at moments desperately wish they weren't a mom. Some of us are estranged from our moms or our kids, but the one fact that is true about all of us is we have a mom. The Bible tells us there's a lot of good moms in the Bible. There's some bad moms in the Bible. There's some average moms. There's some godly moms in the Bible. But there's a pretty famous passage in Proverbs chapter 31 that tells us about the excellent woman, the virtuous wife. Now, I want us to understand something before I start. I believe that what we have in this passage, right, throughout Proverbs, what we're given is sort of, right, we're given Proverbs. We're given general statements about wisdom and excellence and money and so what I believe the writer of Proverbs gives us at the end is the illustration of what this virtuous person looks like, and he uses this woman as the vehicle to sort of describe it. But in the same way that when we think about what does it mean to be an elder who's a leader of the church or a deacon, and there's lists of attributes in those spots, and what we've said is what that really describes is Christian maturity. I believe this is a similar sort of spot, where what we get here is Christian maturity. What does it mean to be someone who is godly? This is something we should be aspiring to. It's something that we might find some encouragement from in the ways that we see these attributes in ourselves. We might even get some challenge in the ways that we don't feel like we measure up. But here, friend, here's the reality. There's a danger on a morning like this. And the danger is that we all have what I'll call skeletons in our closet. I remember when I was a freshman in college, I'd gone to Cedarville. I was sitting in one of my very first Bible classes, and we were having an interesting discussion on the doctrine of original sin. Now, maybe to you that's not an interesting doctrine, but to me it certainly was. And the idea of original sin is that every person since Adam and Eve, outside of Jesus, who has been born in all of human history, when they were born, had sin. That they were, right, that they, because they were a child, they were human, they had earthly mothers and fathers, they were born in sin. And as I was sitting there, I remember having this conversation with myself as I'm grappling with this doctrine about my grandma. Now, my grandma's name was Eunice. Grandma moved in with us. I was about 3 years old. Grandma had had a brain aneurysm in her 60s, and following her aneurysm, she needed to live with somebody. Her and my dad decided that what they would do was pool their resources and buy a house. They didn't tell my mom until the deal was done. It's a true story. Mom is not here to debate me, but it's a true story. So they bought this house. Grandma had the lower level of a split level, and she had her own kitchen that she never cooked in, not even one time that I ever remember, her own bathroom. And because my mom worked, the consequence was every day when I got home from school, Grandma would have me sit down at the counter and she would feed me. Now, if you know me very well, you know that that is the way to convince me you're perfect. And so every day, right, it was apple schnitzels with peanut butter, or one of my favorite things, my grandma would make a piece of toast, and she would put some ketchup on there and a slice of American cheese and sprinkle some oregano on there, and that was pizza. It's true, my standards aren't very high, really. Like, you want me to think you're perfect, you don't have to do much. Like, this was what Grandma did. And so in my mind, of all the people in the world that I could think that were perfect, was my grandma. But here I am, right? I'm 48 years old, and Grandma has been gone for 20 plus years. And what I know is not just Grandma had original sin, but Grandma had everyday sin. Every once in a while, right? Grandma was judgmental or impatient or maybe greedy, right? She was good, but she was not perfect. She was a sinner. And so if my grandma was a sinner, you're all sinners too. She made mistakes and lost her temper and was judgmental, but she needed Jesus. And so it's easy, right, when we begin to explore character and expectations, examples of what we're called to, what we tend to become are people who defend ourselves. We know why we've done the things that don't measure up. We defend ourselves and we find fault in everybody else's shortcomings. Whether that's our moms or our wives or our sisters or our dads or our brothers, our neighbors, our teachers, our bosses. What I think we're supposed to do, though, is hold this up as a mirror. Not for the purpose of feeling guilty, but for the purpose of knowing where it is that we should be going. What is it that we are desiring to become? So let me get the obvious out of the way. We all have a mom, and they are all sinners, and so are we. We all need a Savior. Moms, grandmas, daughters, husbands, dads, brothers, neighbors, bosses, teachers, all of us. Let's find ourselves together this morning in Proverbs chapter 31, if you want to turn there with me. We'll begin in verse number 10. An excellent wife, who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She is like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maidens. She considers a field and she buys it with the fruit of her hands. She plants a vineyard. She dresses herself with strength and she makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. She puts her hands to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. She opens her hands to the poor, and she reaches out her hand to the needy. She is not afraid of snow for her household, for all of her household are clothed in scarlet. She makes bed coverings for herself, and her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates, and when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments, and she sells them. She delivers sashes to the merchant. Strength and dignity are her clothing. She laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up, and they call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. Now, if you flip up, if you were reading along to verse number 1 of chapter 31, what you read there is that this is a lesson, an oracle that his mother taught him. They're the words of King Lemuel, recounting the words of his mom. So it's a lesson from a mom for us on Mother's Day. A lesson his mom taught him. Look at verse number 10, right? This is about an excellent wife, woman, person, follower of God himself. And that excellence, right? It's a praiseworthy. There's a sense of nobility and virtue. Who can find someone like this? More precious than jewels. I, in 25 years of marriage, would tell you that for those who get married, 25 years of pastoral ministry, there are few things that determine the joy and sorrow of someone's life than the person that they choose to marry. That's, in many ways, the lesson at the front end, right, that this mother has taught the king. Choose wisely, look wisely, look for more than just the physical beauty. I want us to recognize, right, the author, Lemuel, is describing a person of high character, a follower of God. And so where your mom or wife or friend or you model these things, we want to praise God for them. But where they or you don't, we want to ask for forgiveness or extend mercy. We should desire to be someone that these things could be said about us. Clearly, character is something rare and worthwhile. Our culture, right, would value all the wrong things. Physical beauty, athletic prowess, financial gain. Do I drive the right car, live in the right neighborhood, have a big enough 401k? And what the Proverbs writer says to us is character matters so much more. Nobility, godliness, honesty, integrity, that's the thing that's worthwhile. That's the thing that is worthy work. If Jerry was writing it, he might say, don't settle for a pretty face. Don't settle for deep pockets or rich parents. It is worth it to look and to search and to become a person of great character. I've got things in my own mind that I know my mom has said enough times that myself and my brother and my sisters, we can recount. Every once in a while they come out of our mouths without even intending them to. Someday my children, I hope, will tell you this: character always shows up over time. That's Proverbs if Jerry was writing them. Character shows up over time, always. Give people time. They will tell you, reveal to you who they are. There's an authenticity and authenticness that is only revealed through time and fire. The word authentic is actually rooted, if you look in the old languages, in a word that means that you're someone who lives without wax. And you think to yourself, that makes no sense to me here in the 21st century. Here's what it meant. When you were someone who cast pottery, right, sometimes there would be a chip or a flaw or a crack, or right in the heating process it wouldn't quite be perfect. And so what unscrupulous pottery dealers would do is fill that in with wax and then paint over the top of it. So that when you picked it up, when you looked at it, right, it looked perfect and smooth and like there were no blemishes. But when you got it home, when you tried to actually use it, when it sat out in the sun, when you tried to heat something inside of it, the wax would melt and the flaw would be revealed. We should be those who live without wax. The excellence of that wife, the excellence of a person of character, it would say to us, right, that there is a healthy comparison. That as we think about it, we are distinguishing between good and great. It's almost always easy to distinguish between bad and good, especially when it comes to people. Right? It becomes fairly obvious who the bad people are. Bad is a general term. Right? If you, like the drug dealer, just for hints, you should not date or marry. Okay? That should not be your best friend, the person who is the known murderer. Right? Don't. That's bad. But the distinction between good and great, that's the real work. If one of your children were to come home, or a child that is your nephew, or whoever it is, right, and you're talking to them about your school, and you said, boy, how are you doing? How did you do on that last test that you took? And they said, well, you know, I did better than Emma and Jane and Kate. Is that the actual question? No. That's great. They are not the standards, right? What do we really want to know? Did you get an A, a B, or a C? Are you someone who is, right, rising to the potential? Are you someone, when we think about what the standard is, and what the writer of Proverbs is telling us is, there is a standard of excellence and authenticity and character. And that's what we should be looking for. That's what we should be desiring to be. That kind of person is someone who fears the Lord. Right? We don't allow the standard, we don't measure ourselves against other men. Excellence isn't determined by popular opinion, but by the standards of a high and holy God. How do you develop this thing called character? How do you cultivate it? How do you massage it into who you are? How does it get sort of rubbed into so that it becomes a part of you? How do you move to the next level? Even this morning, as we're going to identify some areas, some very specific things that the writer of Proverbs is going to say to us, this is what excellence is. This is what character is. This is how you know. Maybe you've lost your character. Maybe you're someone your children don't respect anymore. Maybe your mate doesn't want to hang out with you or be around you. Maybe you've lost your job in the past because of poor decisions that you've made. What do? Can we recover from that? Is that even a possibility? Or are we just one of those bad people that we shouldn't be around? See, again, I think we started a spot that says all of us begin at a spot of sin. All of us begin at a spot of brokenness. And as Jesus moves in and transforms us, I believe there is possibilities to grow and become. The first thing I think we should understand is that character is a matter of the heart. It's not a program. Even this morning, I'm going to hear in a second, I'm going to walk through our list here and kind of point some out, make some observations. This is not a 12-step character program. You don't get character because you got a checklist. That may be the advice that you can receive, but hear me, it begins as a matter of our heart. You have to desire to become someone of character. We don't ever become good or better on accident. It's a matter of the heart. I told you a few weeks ago about my least favorite movie of all time, Titanic, in case you weren't here or have forgotten. I don't like the movie. I think it's dumb. I think you began a movie that you all knew how it was going to end, and it didn't get better as it went along. But here's the thing. Most people for many years believed that the Titanic sank because it ran into a giant iceberg that punched a gaping hole in the bottom of it, and it took on too much water and fell to the bottom. Is that what you believe? Maybe it is. Do you want to know the reality? The reality is that what happened was the boat brushed the side of an iceberg that actually made 3 long, but not very wide, slits in the hull of the ship below the water level. It wasn't one big, giant punch a hole in. It was a series of 6 much smaller things below the surface where it couldn't be seen. Those 6 slits allowed the water in. It was the combination of a series of small things. It's true in our own lives. Most of us, even those who we know at the end of the story, right? By the time you make the news, you've usually done something big and giant and horrific. But that's not where the problem usually begins. It usually begins with small little slits below the surface that nobody sees. Most people do not set out as murderers or rapists. But it's the series of small decisions, small indiscretions, small sins. And so this morning, as we think about our characters, we think about who it is that God is calling us to, who we should be thankful if maybe we had a wife or a mother like this. I encourage you, I invite you to engage this and begin to look at the details, the small parts of who we are. If we drop down to verse number 11 of chapter 31 in Proverbs, we see an excellent wife who can find. She is far more precious than jewels. We're going to see through this list that character, virtue starts at home. In verse number 11, right, we see that she is someone who is trustworthy. Her decisions are going to be good for her home and its people. She's in it for the long haul. She makes long-term decisions. She's not someone consumed with the short-term gain. She's someone you can trust, right? Character shows up over time. She's trustworthy. Verse number 13, she is someone who is industrious. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She's productive. She is not someone sitting about drinking wine and eating bonbons and watching The View. There's nothing wrong with wine, bonbons, or The View. Well, okay, maybe. But that's not the characterization of her and her time. She is working with, right? If you keep reading, she's working with, watching. She's like the merchant ships. She is finding deals at Costco and Aldi and coupons and Goodwill. She's someone who's wise with money. She is someone who can, right, manage the assets and the resources of her household well. Verse number 15, it says she rises while it is night. She gets up early in the morning. She isn't lazy. She's seen the sunrise. She's up and moving. She's responsible for the food for her household, the portions for her maidens. If she has maidens, that's an indication that the family was wealthy enough to have servants, right? These are people of means. These are people of success. And she's caring for them, right? She's still treating them well. Isn't that one of the hallmarks of character? How do you treat the people that you don't have to treat well? How do you treat the server at the restaurant? Are you someone who tips well? Portioning, right? That she's portioning the things is an indication of organization. Is she someone who manages and portions and organizes her home and its resources? And a church of women all rose up and said, I need to go to Target today. See, you're not laughing at the jokes. All right, I'm trying. Used up all the laughs at the beginning. Verse 16, she considers a field and she buys it. Now, that means she has access to the money. At our house, we don't really even have a checkbook anymore, so like the old version of this would be like, right, she's the person who carries the checkbook. But she's the person who has access to the stuff. She's got money and she's responsible. She gets to make decisions. She's got a real estate license, if you will, and she's making deals. And notice at the end of the verse, what she does is she buys this land and then she plants a vineyard. She's flipping houses. She's investing and resourcing. She's turning it into a center of profit. Verse number 17, she has strong arms. She is someone who's dressed in strength. And the lamp doesn't go out at night. She's defined by character and strength. She's prepared for what is coming. Jesus, right, later on is going to tell the parable of the bridesmaids who didn't have enough oil for their lamp, and so as the bridegroom arrived, they needed to go ask somebody else for oil. I think he probably had this very proverb in mind as he told that parable. This woman, right, is prepared. She has enough. She has enough fuel. She's portioned and managed her assets and her resources and her people. And look at verse 20, though. But she's still compassionate. She's open-handed to the poor. She's managing her own household well enough that there is leftover that she can be kind and generous to others in need. Verse 22, she makes household goods and bedclothes. She's arrayed in fine linen and purple. This means that she is dressed well. She's made certain that her house looks good. That things, right, are decorated, and purple was the most expensive of the dyes, and so consequently the most expensive of the materials. She looks good. It isn't wrong to dress nicely or attractively or fashionably. She's managed her resources so that she is in a position, right, to be generous with those, that they're managed well. She can care for her household, and she still has enough that she can dress attractively and nicely and fashionably. Verse number 26. She's not full of hot air, but when she opens her mouth, wisdom is what comes out. She teaches kindness. The defining traits of her words are wisdom and kindness. She doesn't eat the bread of idleness. She isn't a slackabout. She isn't best known because she always has the latest gossip and news. She's known for her activity and her accomplishment and her diligence and her industry and her hospitality. And then you come to verse number 28. Character, what does it do? It shows up over time. Who sees it better than anybody else? The people who live with her. Verse number 28, her children rise up and they call her blessed. And her husband also, and he praises her. See, they know her. They see her. Time is the measure of our character. It shows up. And I want you to hear this. It doesn't mean that she doesn't have a bad day. It doesn't mean she doesn't have a bad week or a bad month, maybe even a bad year. It doesn't mean that every business transaction that she did, every investment or every vineyard that she planted was perfectly successful. It doesn't mean that she never said an unkind word or something that was foolish. It doesn't mean she never had a day where she sat about and watched the view. What it means is that over time, the content of her character was such that what was developed, what was known about her, is the things that were recorded. The tale of her character, the story of her life, the evidence of their life together, the husband, the wife, the kids, the people who know her best, is that she is someone who is praiseworthy. So what do we do with that? For some of us, right, we probably sit here this morning and maybe you feel guilt. Maybe you feel like, I wish I wouldn't have even come today because now all I've got is a list of ways I didn't measure up. Or maybe you sit here this morning and as you thought through the list, you're reminded of all the ways that your own mom or your own grandma or your own wife doesn't measure up. Or that you don't measure up. Or maybe all you hear in there is, I wish that I would have had someone who cared for me in that sort of way when I was a kid. And not the slacker that I had. See, the danger, right, is that this is true for all of us as something that we can aspire. It's true for all of us that we can see the ways that we don't measure up and the way that those around us don't measure up. And I don't think that the purpose of this is for us to feel guilt or to extend guilt to others. I think we're to desire to aspire to this. And so I'm going to encourage you in this moment. Don't write yourself a list of 12 things. Don't go, here are all of the ways that I fall short. Choose one. Choose one. Allow the Holy Spirit to move in your heart and your soul and go, here is one way that I think I should aspire to be more excellent. That I can do better in the days ahead. That in the power of the Holy Spirit, through the transforming work of the gospel in my life, I can become someone. Maybe it's someone whose words need to be wise and kind. Maybe you're someone who needs to take the wisdom that you possess and the acumen that you have and go, I'm going to be industrious in this sort of way. Maybe you're a husband who needs to be someone who becomes a praise giver, who recognizes the way that our wives work. Maybe you're a son or a daughter who need to be someone who recognize your mom or your grandma or one of your sisters or a niece and go, I see the work that you are doing and I praise the Lord for you. In a moment here, I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to ask you to let me know if you're one of those people who found something in here that you aspire to. Maybe in this list you found some way that you fall short. Maybe a sin or a foolishness that you need to confess. The joy and the beauty of the reality of this, right, is as we face the mirror, we know that we have forgiveness through Jesus. We've been talking about it, right? The consequence of the resurrection and the cross is we get forgiveness for the ways that we don't measure up. And the third thing that I want to say as we close is that maybe you sit here this morning and you don't have this kind of a relationship with God Himself. You don't have a desire even maybe to look into the mirror. You never understood the reality of the cross and the gospel. And today can be your day.